Right now, you're listening to the Azeem Digital Asks podcast, the podcast where I, Azeem, talk to some of the top marketers in the industry, find out everything about them, how they got to where they are today, and more importantly, sharing some really useful marketing tips that will help everybody listening to this become better marketers. Stay tuned for another great episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Azeem Digital Asks podcast. I've got a brilliant guest with me today, Owain Lloyd-Williams, who is an SEO consultant with a decade's experience in the industry. Initially cut his SEO teeth during a long stint working in China in a previous life, and during his time in the industry he's consulted for a large palette of brands in a variety of industries, both agency and in-house side, has a particular focus on e-commerce SEO, and outside of SEO, he's a dab hand at guitar and Mandarin Chinese. Still dreams of being Prime Minister when he grows up, which I'll ask him more about, because right now that sounds like definitely a poison chalice. But yeah, Owen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Azeem.
How's it going?
Yeah, good. Just coming to the end of a pretty hectic week, so it's just good to kind of just take a step back and unload and just have a little bit of a chat, which I'm looking forward to.
Good stuff, good stuff. Before we find out a little bit more about you, I wanted to know, what is your most used emoji and why?
Emojis, yeah, I do like emojis, so I try and use them. I mean, unfortunately, I think I was born just a little bit too late when they started coming in. So whenever I try and use an emoji on WhatsApp or Twitter or whatever, it either comes across as you know. Uh, at worst, horribly sarcastic, or at best, a poor attempt at irony. So, I'm not exactly the best at emojis, but obviously you can have a lot of fun with them, I suppose. But I stick to the good old thumbs up, positivity, approval. Keep it simple.
Mine is the small telephone. Um, I'd agreed
Ah,
to phone a friend, and me and him both kept missing each other. And in the end, instead of just typing out, "When are you free for a call?" we both just stick the phone emoji back
oh
to
right,
each other.
that's really efficient.
I know it
Did say
saves
that.
typing.
Yeah,
We both have got hectic schedules, so I just literally stick the phone emoji with a question mark,
it's
and we
really
go back
good.
from there.
Yeah, saves a few seconds for
Anyway,
sure.
yeah, I know this is not an emoji podcast, though. We'll move on very quickly. Do you want to tell the audience and the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you did a pretty good intro at the beginning, I must say. But yeah, it's Owain Lloyd-Williams here. Yeah, as you might guess, I've got a bit of a weird spelled name. It's a bit Welsh, but so technically it should be Owain, but Owen's fine. Yeah, I've been in the SEO space for about, I'd say, around sort of 10 years. That's probably a bit generous, but we always have like some, I think, interfaces of digital throughout our careers, whatever you go into, really. So there's always a touch point somewhere. So yeah, going back a little bit, I guess I graduated university with an English literature degree. Was initially hoping to get into writing. There's still a bit of that goes on, but yeah, and I very quickly went over to China for a bit, or for a long time actually. So I spent about sort of 5 years working over there. Initially as a sort of standard, teach English as a second language, gap year kind of thing, just to kind of get a bit of experience and find myself in inverted commas. But then that very quickly snowballed into a lot of other opportunities, and this was at a time. So we're sort of looking about sort of 10 years ago now. When it was China was a little bit more liberal than it is now, which I guess is saying one thing, but things have changed certainly over there. But there was a lot of opportunity over there to kind of get involved in all kinds of things like media, writing, translation, and that's where I kind of, I guess, hit SEO really. So I found myself running an expat magazine over there for a year or so, which I was responsible for most of the content for, which was translating from Chinese into English and writing articles, and I guess it all started from there, really.
Nice, nice. So very interesting background and interesting journey into the industry. When did you realize that it was going to be the career for you?
Yeah, I'm going to have to give you a pretty cliched answer on this, I'm afraid. I've listened to a few of your previous episodes where a lot of people have said that they did fall into it, and that's exactly what happened. I think so I guess going back to the China experience, that was, I guess, a kind of unconscious integration of SEO, unconscious exposure of SEO and digital. And then when I came back to the UK, I sort of marketed myself as this kind of guy who knew China and could help you go into the biggest market in the world. And I rode that wave for a little bit, and doing a little bit on that still, actually, which we'll come to later. But I came back, and it took a little while to kind of get back on my feet, and because 5 years away, you're kind of having to start again, kind of thing, and find out what the market was. But I was very lucky. I got picked up by a startup agency that are still going strong, who were looking for someone who spoke Chinese for an SEO project. It was initially just an audit that they had signed off for one of their clients, just literally a audience analysis listening piece. And from then, I was exposed to a lot of other things. They kept me on very luckily, which I'm very thankful for. And then I was able to, typical agency life, touch a lot of different clients, touch a lot of different projects. And then it just kind of went from there, really. And since then, I've worked for a number of different agencies and in-house clients as well. And it's just always felt like it's drawn on a lot of kind of stuff that is my bread and butter, which is stuff like communication, writing, and I guess kind of stakeholder management is a big part of a lot of what SEO entails, and kind of I hate to use the word evangelizing, but kind of accentuating the importance of SEO. And the technical side of it and the content side of it is just interesting to me anyway, and it's always changing, and it's always something that you can learn from. So, and yeah, here we are 10 years later, I guess, and it's still something that I'm enjoying, and I guess it just touches a lot of different points for me, as what I want to get out of a career, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. You sound like a well-rounded SEO with a lot of experience. I'm sure later on there's definitely going to be a lot of nuggets of wisdom which the listeners will take away a lot of value from. Wanted to just go back a little bit, let's say time travel. So if you could go back to when you first started in the industry, armed with everything that you know now, what advice do you think that you would give to yourself?
It's a great question. Take yourself less seriously, and yeah, don't. I guess it's not really SEO specific, right? I mean, like, there's tons of advice I give myself on, kind of going back and exposing yourself more to a number of different tools that are out there at the time. And this was, before you had other tools that had come out recently, so let's say Sitebulb or Ahrefs was just I guess emerging at the time, but there was still enough out there. There was still a community, to learn from. Moz, influencers on Twitter. That hasn't really changed. Obviously, there's more now. There's more richness of resource. So that's something that I would maybe go back to myself and just say, look, like, spend a bit of time, outside the job, a bit more, maybe just the kind of experimenting with tools, build your own website. That's something I didn't do until a lot later, which I think is invaluable for anyone who wants to start in SEO. But I guess overarchingly, and going back to the first point, yeah, I think take yourself less seriously, and like, I guess I had this recurring thing in a few roles where if I was given feedback on work, or kind of being told a certain way by someone who had like legitimately a lot more experience and expertise than me, I had a very early habit in my career of taking things quite personally, and being like, oh, who do you think you are, kind of thing, which is really silly, and it never manifested itself into something that was unprofessional in the room. But it's something that I think, if you're young in the early 20s, you just graduated, it's something that I think be aware of, and knock it on the head as early as you can, I think, and just be as objective and as open as you possibly can, particularly in an industry that has now been around for like a few decades, and there's people out there that have done so much, and you can learn so much from it. And it is a very open industry in that sense, where you can learn so much, and you can get exposure to people that are willing to share their knowledge and tell you how to do your job better, basically. And that's just something that I wish I kind of had that awareness earlier on. It certainly came later on, but the earlier the better. If you can knock that on the head, then that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you've just said there will resonate with a lot of people. A lot of people probably have very similar feelings early on in their career. So let's just broaden that a little bit. So, I mean, like you said yourself, over 10 years in the industry, various different markets, working in international SEO. Are you able to share with the listeners one or two things that you've learned and picked up throughout your working career?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to just being a sponge as best possible as you can, and yeah, I can't accentuate the importance enough of building your own website. That's a lot of where that raw exposure to SEO comes from. So I think a lot of people that work, let's say on the agency side, for example, and probably to a less extent on the client side, you're working as a, let's say you've got your first role SEO executive or account manager at a later stage. There's probably a small chance, depending on the client, but a very small chance that you'll have exposure to what that looks like in terms of implementation into a raw CMS using raw code, whether it's JS, CSS, or whatever. That's something that to understand how that markup looks, and then how to kind of perhaps brief that better into developers and stakeholders on the client side. That's something that you can really only get from kind of, I guess, first-hand experience, and help to understand better how websites work in general. So really just get a side hustle. I think whether it's your own personal website. So I've got a little website that I kind of curate every now and again. It's like a blog/CV website that I will go in and tinker with every now and again. Or whether you want to go something more adventurous, like start thinking about an affiliate site or something like that, or like a hobby blog. This is where like a lot of the trial and error for SEO can come from, and depending on what you're actually doing and depending on what you're selling or the purpose of the site, you've got room to make mistakes, and there's no stakeholders to anger or clients or bosses if things go wrong. So that's definitely something that I would like recommend highly, would be to kind of, as soon as you can, build your own website and just start playing around.
Great shout. Definitely co-sign that one. Absolutely, you should have your own site and mess around and break it and learn how to fix it. So yeah, good shout there. You mentioned earlier on about drawing inspiration and getting inspiration from people. So I wanted to ask you, for yourself, who has been a big inspiration for you in the industry?
Yeah, this is something that I often think about, actually. I sort of look back and I'm like, there's 2 or 3 people that I think I would just like, some people you go to war with, I guess, if it came down to it. That sounds a bit dramatic, but like people that have your back. And yeah, there's I can name like one agency that I worked at before. I'm not allowed to name names. Built Visible were fantastic. It was a fantastic place to work. I was there for about 1.5 years or so. Different stage of my career at the time, and I moved on. But the guys there were just like very good at kind of like specializing in technical SEO expertise. There was a really good unit there in terms of people was having each other's backs at the time. We had a lot of fun. And there was a weekly routine of just having kind of SEO forums, which I don't think a lot of brands do these days, particularly agencies, because a lot of it is fixated on obviously client deliverables. But they made the time to actually put some time aside where you would learn and you would go in and experiment and get things wrong. Going back to my earlier point about a website, there was a space for that. So definitely those guys. I won't embarrass any individuals. I think they probably know who they are. And then at a previous job, about 1 year ago or so, I was working at Chael, which is, I was there for a while, which is an agency which is owned by Samsung. And the guys there were fantastic. In terms of SEO influence, there was a stakeholder on the Samsung side. So we were an agency that were managed by Samsung. So we kind of were like an in-house kind of offshoot agency which managed all their content. And I was kind of like found myself bizarrely running their SEO strategy for Europe, which was just a bit mad. And then they brought in like a proper head of SEO to do that and do it a lot better. And that taught me an awful lot about, the nuances of stakeholder management, the detail and forensic levels of management across such a large enterprise business, getting things right, getting standardization and nomenclature for keyword groups that I hadn't even thought about before. We had a setup. Obviously, it's a huge business, Samsung. They've got products across, phones, cameras, TVs, you name it, any kind of white goods, electronic goods. And we had a reporting system. There were budgets there to look at this properly. And, but I guess the infrastructure that we had at the time, or I inherited and subsequently built out and trained, local markets to do, was, I guess, probably really immature, compared to what this guy brought in. And it was just such a detailed look at how to do that properly. And that kind of brought things a lot home in terms of I guess reminding yourself of how forensic at times we have to be as SEOs, and how it's easy to get caught up in the kind of day to day, and what you're delivering and getting stuff off your plate. The bread and butter of being a good SEO is detail, and is attention, and is that discipline. And that guy taught me a lot, basically.
Awesome. Good stuff. So let's talk about your current role right now and some of the challenges that you've got. Do you want to share with the listeners what challenges you do have and how you're overcoming them?
Yeah, so I'm in the unique position. So as this is being recorded, I've actually just started a relatively new role in the forex space, in the kind of trading space, which is an industry that I'm a little bit new to. So that's a steep learning curve, but it's a unique opportunity where it's a relatively established brand, but they don't have properties set up across the different markets they want to focus, and they're going through a complete rebrand and a complete migration and a kind of complete kind of rehousing of the various different properties across various different regions, which is very exciting. So I've never actually been in that position before. I've always been working in-house or agency side, where you're working on an account that has a lot of history and has a lot of stakeholders. Obviously this one does as well, but I'm in the driving seat, to some degree, within reason, where I can kind of go in and be like, well, we need to get that sorted out at the beginning as opposed to retrospectively, which is a very, I guess, privileged place to be in as an SEO. Oftentimes SEO is, I guess, historically been brought in a few years down the line when brands realize they need growth, but then it hasn't been factored in at the beginning of the conversation when those builds have happened. There's tons of brand, name any brand, and they'll have that problem. So that's a particular interesting thing to be in at the moment. I guess the main challenge for them at the moment is going. I'm kind of full circling here, and they want to branch out into China, and I guess this is partly why I was brought on. Which has changed in the past few years. It's a lot more difficult these days to go into China if you haven't got a physical presence in China and you haven't got the business credentials. You used to be able to do it. So I used to be able to set up Baidu accounts for clients and track analytics and get websites indexed and so on from the UK. But now that's a lot more difficult, and the government have really cracked down on that. So that's something that is a particular challenge at the moment for that region. And yeah, as I'm sure you're aware, Baidu, it's a completely different search engine to Google. It has a different algorithm, some similarities, but some not. There's different ways that you have to game it. It's a little bit Wild West out there still, although things are highly regulated. So it's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of I have written a lot of stuff on how to do SEO in China. That was a kind of as I mentioned before, something that I carved out for myself early on in my career. But I imagine all that is out of date now. So I'm having to kind of re-educate myself on China whilst do the other markets as well. So it's exciting. A lot going on.
Nice, very busy you sound.
Yeah.
As it is a lockdown podcast, I do have to ask you about COVID, how that's affected you professionally and how you've responded to that.
So the previous project I was working on, we were obviously very quick to remote working, which wasn't too much of an issue, I don't think, because the business itself at the time, it was a freelance platform that I was consulting for. So they by their kind of very brand ethos have a very kind of remote working philosophy. So it wasn't too much of a problem at the time. But of course, like when lockdown happened, when things happened during the summer and earlier on in the spring with the economy fluctuating, there were a lot of concerns at the time. We saw a lot of traffic increase because obviously we had a lot of people in this country and worldwide that were looking for work. So that saw an awful lot of spike in traffic at the time on the site, which was great. But obviously the challenge came in kind of, measuring that, attributing that properly, and seeing where that was coming from and how they were actually converting at the time. It was a lucky place to be in, I think, because the business was, kind of set up for that, I suppose. In terms of its ethos, it was very, I suppose, future-proof. It was advocating the idea of remote working. It was advocating the idea of, death of the office, flexible working, and so on and so on. But obviously, there was still that, kind of financial hit that everyone saw on their platform at the time. But there was a lot of opportunities that came out of it. So tons of content opportunities that we put out around your basics at the beginning. Everyone was doing it. How to work from home. What to do to keep your colleagues tuned in a rough time that isn't a quiz every week. Things like that. So there was a lot of opportunity that came with that, I think, and that's reflected, I suppose, in in a lot of Google data that's coming out at the moment in terms of like lockdown focused content and how to's and so on. The brand was in quite a good position to to do that. And my current job as it stands is remote. So being onboarded remote for the first time has been a new experience. It was sort of given a laptop, set up on Microsoft Teams, and off you go. But they've been very good, and it's been very very smooth so far. And it's a fun experience for everyone. It's challenging for everyone, I suppose. But I think at some stage we'll get to the point where we're back in the office once a week. I think we get a WeWork, we get a co-working space just to sound out ideas and whiteboard stuff out. So hopefully, once this is all over, we do get to a space where it's a hybrid model, which I think is preferable.
Yeah, completely agree. I think a lot of people's preference is to move towards that hybrid model. Nicely covered off one of the questions I was going to ask you later on as well. So excellent. Thank you very much
Good
for
stuff.
that. Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit more about yourself then. So, in terms of your own personal development, how are you continuing to learn and gain knowledge in order to stay on top or keep on top of everything that's going on in the industry right now?
Yeah, so I'm quite. I've got my ears to the ground on Twitter quite a bit, So I spend a bit of time on there. That's where I get a lot of my SEO updates, and that's really nothing new. I suppose everyone that's probably listening to this is well familiar with that. So I'm not sure how useful that tip is. Yeah, that I mean, to be honest, there's not much more to it than that. If I'm really honest, I've got a bookmark of various blogs, be it the Google Search Liaison blog or Moz or a number of agencies that I follow and individuals that I follow on Twitter that have blogs I've subscribed to that go into my inbox, and it's a nice routine where I kind of make at least an hour. I'd say maybe an hour and a half a week of just dedicated block out time to just develop on SEO. I suppose a lot of people have that routine in their minds where they go on Twitter quite a lot. There's nothing particularly new there, but I suppose the current challenge that I am facing to my own personal circumstances is kind of brushing up on China SEO, which has been fun. Rereading the Baidu blogs, the Baidu Search Console blogs, which are all in Chinese, so that's been quite fun. Kind of flexing those muscles again. But again, that's not really kind of something that's too relatable to your listeners, I suppose. But it's a combination of Twitter. Twitter is the go-to resource for me these days. Pretty basic. Obviously, there's a number of conferences that happen that are online at the moment. So Brighton SEO just happened remote, and that was really smooth. That was a really good experience. I was able to have a window open whilst I was working, while someone was doing a talk, and obviously they're recorded, so you can go back to them, and that was a really good format to kind of keep a bit of learning going whilst you're working.
Nice. Okay, let's spin it on its head a little bit now, and let's talk about failure. So, in the last 12 months, what do you think has been the biggest failure for you, and why do you think it happened?
Yeah, so this is actually very COVID related and situation related, and I guess the other theme that goes along with that is communication, which I think which I'll kind of expand on in a little bit, but it's something that's so important to SEO. So it was a perfect storm of a Google core update, which happened in May, which we all remember, a disavow project, and a de-indexation project. And also all the uncertainty and anxiety that went around, lockdown and coronavirus in general, hitting the numbers, hitting traffic, and so on. And this all happened in May. So in the run up to this, prior to lockdown, prior to COVID, I was scoping out quite a big disavow project with the brand I was working with at the time. You had relatively spammy backlink profile that just needed tidying them up. So that was kind of one of the first things I took on and looked at and made it my little baby for a while. Got it into a shape where it was deliverable by March. Got it checked over by a number of people. We had an agency working with at the time. They gave it a spot check. They gave it a couple of recommendations. Submitted the file to Google around April, whilst at the same time managing a big de-indexation project as well. So the website at the time had an awful lot of kind of UGC URL content that it had a number of scripts that meant that if a user searched for a term within the site search of that site, it created a unique URL which was oftentimes indexable, which is a complete nightmare.
Fun.
And very, very unmanageable. So I was working with the developers to manage that. What I didn't realize, and this is a big learning from my front moving forward, is that a lot of the attribution of SEO success which I inherited, which manifested itself in keyword rank tracking and analytics views set up, was benchmarked against URLs and site-wide performance, which included those de-indexed and also I suppose in relation to spammy link profile URLs. So when that happened, and when those two things kicked in, plus the May core update, I remember waking up one day and just seeing drops everywhere. My weekly keyword reporting was skewed all over the place. And I had to explain myself in a very tense board meeting with my seniors at the time, and it was the actual, in terms of tangential effect, it wasn't that bad in terms of how it hit the business, in terms of actual revenue and so on, but it was a big scare, I think, at the time, and it's something which was a big learning and a big failure on my part not to do my homework on the reporting that was set up around these changes and also manage expectations on my side. So I think that even though my experience is in-house and agency, it's more on the agency side where you're surrounded by SEOs, like-minded people who get it and who will have your back and who will understand what we're doing here, if it's a disavow project or a de-indexation project, and you'll have that, I guess, echo chamber of reassurance, which I was used to at the time. And in this particular position, I didn't really have that, and I was having to kind of backtrack a little bit and explain my decisions of why this happened and what on earth was going on with the site. So yeah, that was a big learning in terms of communication and doing your homework and just digging around to make sure that you don't directly anger key stakeholders in the process.
Yeah, I bet. I think they must have heard you telling that story and they were trying to phone you to stop you telling that story just now.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Last couple from me then, before we have to let you go. I always ask this to all of the guests. So if we had swap roles right now, what question would you ask yourself that I've not asked you already?
What question would you ask yourself? That's very good. God, why aren't you? What? Yeah. I don't know. I guess it would be like, what would you be doing if you weren't doing SEO? That's always an interesting one.
Go on. You've asked, now you've got to answer it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was a teacher for a bit. Not a proper teacher in terms of qualified by UK standards, but a teacher with a certificate that I did over a weekend and was doing it in China for a bit, basically. And I enjoyed that. It was really good. Different ages, different levels of English, but I enjoyed that influence on people's lives. And that's something that, who knows, may go into at some point. I don't know. We'll see how SEO goes for the time being. I think it's pretty sustainable for the next few years, but we'll see. And yeah, something else was, you mentioned it right at the beginning, the Prime Minister thing. Yeah, I've always been interested in politics. I've always been active in politics. So that's something that I possibly might look at some point. But again, it's, as you rightly mentioned, the poison chalice, and will be a lot of kind of, I guess, personal compromises and privacy compromises and so on that I don't think I quite comprehend the reality of. It's a silly little, juvenile dream that you have as a kid that I've always been like, it'd be nice to be an MP, but no, that would be mad, I think, at the current time. We'll wait a few years on that one. Speak to me in 5 years. Obviously, it's not that easy of just being an MP,
If this is still going in 5 years' time, I'll get you back on and let's see what's happened.
What's your policy on? Yeah, God.
So last couple from me then. Again, I'm probably going to end up making a playlist, but I wanted to put you in that hypothetical situation. You need to get into maximum productivity. If you do listen to music, what's in your ears? What is your go-to song, artist, playlist? What helps you get into that zone?
Yeah, it's a really good question. like I was quite lucky as a kid to be indoctrinated by two very music fanatic parents, which has imbued me with all the 60s and 70s, your Dylans, your Rolling Stones, Joni Mitchell, that kind of stuff. Stuff with a lot of words, I guess, the folk music, but that stuff I can't really listen to. I guess that's my kind of go-to music genre. I like a bit of everything, obviously, but that stuff I can't really listen to if I'm working, if I'm looking at Excel, huge data arrays and so on. So I actually listen to a lot of podcasts. I know that completely contradicts what I just said in terms of words, but I've reached this. I've done it so much through lockdown where I have a podcast just in the background that I can sort of switch one part of my brain off, still hear it, still digest it, and yet also be able to focus on my work. I don't know how I've done that, but I'd recommend anyone who likes podcasts to give that a go. And in particular, like things like the Adam Buxton podcast, it's quite light, it's quite warm. He has a couple of guests, so you can sort of dip in and out of what he's saying there. It's like an hour and a half long, so you can just have him on in the background, just like a nice friendly radio voice, I suppose. Failing that, it's got to be some sort of ambient music, I think. Sigur Rós is a big one for me. Slow Dive, that sort of dream poppy kind of shoegazy stuff that is quite ambient and quite wall of soundy that you can just have in the background and not necessarily pay attention to and just focus.
Nice, interesting answer there. Definitely varies from some of the previous guests.
A lot of them have said like heavy metal and stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, like death metal. Like I tried that the other day. I got the new Deftones album and I put that on whilst I was doing keyword research, and I just couldn't. No, I mean, I'm not a fan enough of metal. That's impressive. I can't do that.
Yeah, not for me. Equally, not for me at all. But I'm definitely going to check out some of these recommendations. Owain, that's a shame to say. It's pretty much the end of the podcast. Brilliant. Thanks a lot for sharing lots of really useful tips and sharing your story. If the listeners want to find out a bit more about you, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. So Owain OWAIN_LW. You can find me there. I haven't got the biggest profile or following list, but yeah, I'm on there. I'm pretty active in terms of sharing SEO news. I've also got a website, so if you search my name, you'll just find me there. It should show up, I hope. And yeah, that's it. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So, any questions or, kind of tips on China or whatever I've spoken about, then feel free to get in touch.
Awesome. Again, thanks very much for being a great guest. I'll leave the last word on the podcast to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Azeem. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks for listening.
So that was another great episode in the bag. I'm really enjoying hearing from some brilliant people in this industry. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow me on Spotify. Please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you are using. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and hopefully see you for the next episode.